Good evening. I'm Kimble. Welcome to State of the Union on the Culture Network. Again, I'm Kimble, your host, President CEO of the Financial Services Innovation Coalition, and the Executive Director of the Southern Christian Leadership's Global Policy Initiative. This is our sixth episode, and we have a good guest. The topic tonight is going to be tax policy. It's one of the things we don't talk enough about. We've got a bunch of experts. Adaeze Amaram, our CPA, who is one of our newest members and bringing a lot of expertise to how we need to be viewing tax policy. And then we have Miss Paula Nelson Wise, who's what do you call yourself? This is you are an IRS expert or IRS administrator. What's your title again, Paula? Oh, she's got a delay. She may be fun. All right. Well, then when Paul comes back, we'll get to her. And then Rob Slater, our gracious host and leader from Houston, congressional candidate and otherwise grassroots leader in all of South Houston or South Texas. So we're going to jump right in. If anybody wants to make a little introduction, they can. Otherwise, I have questions. Adaeze?
An introduction, you say?
Sure.
Sure. My name's Adaeze Amaram. I am a certified public accountant. I have a business, YHWH Enterprise, that focuses on maximizing people's potential, mostly financially, but I'm holistic in most things that I do. So it kind of would affect other parts of life. I also have an affordable vacationing business because I do believe that resting, like I said, I'm holistic. Having some time to rest is important for us to be productive and healthy. And I've also got a charitable organization called YHWH Charity, which is focused on spreading love globally. So that's a little excerpt on me.
And so, Rob, do your introduction, but can we keep it to less than an hour? Can we just do the little 5-minute part of your introduction? You're on mute. See? That was perfect. You're on mute.
Y'all set me up. I don't like the games, right? No, my name is Rob Slater, congressional candidate for the new District 29 here in Texas. The new map's coming out this primary season. The next primary in March 3rd of 2026. So I'm not going to take up too much of the time. I'm excited about the questions and the topic of discussion of tonight. All things leads to the tax code, and so let's dive right into it.
Okay. Paula, I see we've lost her. She was having technical difficulties. If she comes back in, we'll roll her in, but we got enough brain power here to power through most of this. So, Daisy, you actually, both of y'all have read the bill, and Tracy, can you pull up the 2-pager? I don't know. So there's a tax bill called HR 2927, the All-American Tax Act, which we've been promoting all year as an alternative to the Trump tax plan, which actually ended up being passed. But what we learned throughout a lot of this, and you guys can testify to this, is that there's a lot of conversation about affordability and the ability of regular Americans to live in America. That's what the New York race was about. That's what a lot of these races are turning into, about affordability, from everything from utility bills to whether you can buy a house to whether you can buy a car. And we as a people, very rarely get engaged in this conversation. So, Adaeze, when you looked at the bill, you actually wrote a statement. What did you think about it?
I thought that it was very innovative, and I described it as a breath of fresh air because it actually did address some things that would allow people that are not in the upper echelons financially to get some relief. I think it was very provocative and innovative for the above the line deductions, especially. I don't think we've ever seen it before, as far as having the medical expenses being fully deductible, the daycare expenses being above the line as well, which would affect, the regular working American that's got children. And then we have making the child credit fully refundable and increasing the cap, although that has vacillated in the past. And I think it may have been fully refundable at one time. But I really love to see these aspects that help everyday life, and especially the things that deal with having children, because if we don't take care of the ones coming behind us, then we have no legacy. I mean, if all the adults die off and we don't have any children, then what are we doing this for? So I think it brings back to light, an emphasis on people, you know what I mean? Sometimes we're a little bit more apt to have compassion when we think about, well, I hope so. I mean, this world is going in some kind of direction, but when we think about the innocent and the younger ones. There are also some things on here, just like as far as bridging the gap, as far as the rental exclusion, which currently it's only those that own homes. And we know how challenging that can be if we're not in a place of wealth, right? If we're not in a place of already being stable. And it's almost a vicious circle when you're trying to get in a place of being stable, to be able to gather the funds that you need. So there's some things here that do, I almost want to use the word equity, but kind of make things a little bit more equitable in that regard.
No, thanks. Rob, the first time you're running for office, you've been a grassroots, business owner. When you saw the tax thing, what were your thoughts?
I thought it was innovative. Not only innovative, I think it's a great talking piece to really educate a lot of the communities about the tax code. We hear the word tax, we run away. A lot of people don't tune in, but all things evolve back to the nuclei, which is the tax code. And so, the expanding the child credits and so on and so forth. I think we talked about it, and in this race, as we've supported on and wanted to, have a basis for our campaign. In some areas, we looked at to see, okay, this is a good basis to go even more progressive down the line. I'll say a bad word that some people think is bad or not, and we could talk about reparations. And whether you want to say reparations or not, I call it compassion. And versus just giving, a 40 acre and a mule type check to Afro-Americans or Black Americans, tie it to the tax code. We give tax breaks to so many big businesses and corporations when they can be transferred to certain segments of the population that is disenfranchised. Then we can start looking at things a little bit different to get that tax break. And so I think it's a good starting point, a good basis, but definitely a great tool to start educating our community on.
No. I will say this. One of the things when we looked at the tax bill and the tax code, we do advocate a lot of our power to other people when it comes to taxes. Like, we don't talk about it. But, I was having a conversation with someone earlier today about, they're talking about the G20 and talking about, the civic part of the G20, which is very interesting. But what we came to the conclusion is that, for all the Western countries, right? The Western democracies, America, England, those, the people are very unhappy. Like, those countries are incredibly unhappy. Most of it's around affordability. They can't afford houses. This is worldwide. It's not just America. It's all these countries that are what they call the developed nations. 80% of that, maybe 90% of that problem is based on the unequitable tax treatment that they receive, right? So if you one of the things that was being addressed in this bill was the fact if you have to go to work, right? I mean, why is it all the burden on employees to show up to work? You got to pay for all your education, right? You got to get education. You don't get any tax break for your college degree. You don't get any tax breaks for your commuting costs, your parking, your gas, your mileage, your gas. You don't get any of that if you're just a regular employee. So we did some calculations of about $15,000 a year goes into supporting your employer when you have to go to work. Oh, I see Paula made it back. So the question is, there's no way for us to sustain a society where 75% of the people have no money. I'll give you a couple of data points. I know, Rob, you love when I do these data points, but there are almost 9 million foreclosed, car repossessions scheduled to be this year. So they're like 7 million right now. By the end of the year, they predict to be 9 million cars being repossessed. So like 22% of credit cards are now 90 days behind past due, and people have record credit. So the tax bill that we're talking about would provide some relief, right? You were able to deduct all your interest from your tax credit, from your credit cards, your car loans, all those things would be deductible. Why is it you think the Americans aren't more up arms. I mean, you guys talk to people all the time. Well, why aren't people more up in arms about this? And Adaeze, go with you first.
I think there's not a big awareness or access or linking what is happening with the tax bill or the taxes to everyday life. I think that it looks a little bit far off because taxes in themselves it's a kind of a daunting subject. Right. It's something that people are like, well, that's kind of, I don't really understand that. It's a lot of moving parts, and things like that. And that, parts that is true. However, as people, we're not ever going to be experts in everything, right? I'm really big on staying in my own lane. I like numbers. I'm good with that. I'm gifted in that area. Not so much with other things. You know what I mean? Like electrician stuff and those core, I don't mess with that. So part of it, I believe, is there needs to be like a perspective shift where we link or align ourselves with others that are experts in those areas. And we have more of a holistic meshing of things because we're all here. We all have certain gifts. We all have something to contribute to society. And I think sometimes when we think things are too far off or aloof, and then especially in the Western mindset, there's this thing on independence. You don't want to, feel like you're not informed or things like that. And so people, kind of tend to put it, I think, to the side, because it seems really daunting. I was going to say, even now, there are some things in the code now that are not widely known that can help us, and I mean everyone, not just the rich and powerful, to get more into that inclusivity that you were talking about. I did have the privilege to work with Big Five accounting firm for a number of years and do stuff for billionaires and billion-dollar companies and things like that. And that's what I noticed. I said, well, wait a minute, this is not this is not limited to them. It's just that we don't know about it. Like, before this bill passes, there is something in there where we can find an exception for interest where we don't include it as income. You know what I mean?
Right.
But so there's, I think, a responsibility that we have, to either also educate ourselves or seek out those who are educated in that area that we trust and take accountability for, I don't want to say for our state, because not all of it is our fault, but for what we can do, the part that we can do, you know what I mean? So that's a short on that.
I know. So Rob, you've been on the campaign trail and you've been out in the community. Does the tax bill ever come up? Do taxes ever come up as an issue? I mean, and then if not, if it does, how? And if not, what is it going to take for it to become more important for people?
Well, I think that it's all about messaging and information and the misinformation of it. People relate to issues that they feel that they are a part of or that it really affects them, not knowing that the tax code affects all of us in a sense. And so it's also so convoluted and confusing, almost, intentionally so, that people just stay away from it. So the only thing for the majority, and this is not being stereotypical, I'm just being transparent, that a lot in certain communities think that the only connection they have to the tax code is income tax time when they get their check back. How many kids do they have, so on and so forth. That directly relates to them. And so when you hear things like, death tax or the write-offs or businesses, those big words and things, like, they don't even think it relates to them. Not understanding some of the basic, fundamentals as, saving your gas receipts or saving, just those type of financial literacy things needs to get enshrined into our educational, all the way, I think, between, K through 5, the fifth grade, and so on and so forth. So just educating our communities on these issues, because some families or some individuals in certain tax brackets, guess what? They understand that. And they teach their kids at a very young age the importance of understanding these economics. So by the time they come of age, it's almost like second nature to them. We need to transform that information, that type of mindset, into all communities and get them involved into the education of what taxation means.
Do you guys really, do you think it's just it seems to me that Marjorie Taylor Greene was on TV, the congresswoman from Georgia, who announced her retirement, kind of she's a like Tea Party person, whatever, a MAGA person, and she was talking about how her kids can't afford houses, can't afford to buy houses. And then Trump came out and said they want to do 50-year mortgages or something crazy. But it seemed to me that there's a fundamental misunderstanding between everyone. So anytime you talk about raising taxes or any of these programs, people say socialism, right? They throw the word socialism out. Do you think people, even educated people, understand what socialism really means in this concept? Deja, I'll let you go, and then I'll let Rob go.
I mean, I'm not sure. What I know is that the word socialism, and I hope I don't get myself in trouble, has like a negative connotation from what we're taught.
Yeah.
But then when you start to look at what is behind it, and it's more about making sure that everyone is taken care of, becomes a gray area. Now, I think the different facets or types of government, there are good aspects and there are aspects that are not so good, probably in all of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so when we hear socialism, for some reason, I guess whatever the negative part of that is out there, but making sure everyone in your domain is taken care of, I don't see what's so negative about that, but I don't think that's associated with socialism when people are talking about it. I mean, I'm not sure. That's my opinion.
Rob?
Same thing. I mean, you were just talking about, is this a masterclass in marketing and taking words and making them bad words, such as DEI, boo, being woke, boo, socialism, boo. They take these words and they market them to where you're supposed to be afraid of them. And, again, I'm being stereotypical in our community. Kevin, we're out in the woods and somebody take off running. Guess what? What we're gonna do? We're gonna start running too before we ask questions. And so it's one of those things. Somebody say socialism must be a bad word, and we just don't really. We have to start taking the message, understanding, teaching the community exactly what it means and how that benefits and how it can benefit the masses and the whole. What 99% of this economy is driven off the backs of small businesses in the community, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider and wider. And so we have to start educating certain swaths of demographics into this process. At one point, if I may, I like to break it down like in Texas alone, right? In Houston, District 18. It's one district that has went without representation almost for a year now. A year, right? And then you have this big, ugly bill that passes by how many votes, Kevin?
One or two. One
vote.
Yeah.
This bill, this tax bill that affects, and Houston alone, the devastating effects of this in so many levels, I think Houston falls in the second or third most negatively affected by the impact of this bill. And we didn't have representation at the table. I would have liked to seen someone push the narrative to Supreme Court on that narrative, taxation without representation. That was the moment. And I was so surprised and appalled that wasn't the topic or the leading discussion. And so once again, we have to get ahead of the messaging and coining and start driving the ship instead of reacting every 5 seconds and playing catch up.
I think, Paula, you're with us?
I am back. Yes.
You missed all the fun. So I'm going to ask you the hard question. The question we're wrestling with is, we're having the tax bill. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the All-American Tax Act. If you have, we'd love to get your your take on it and what you thought, your impressions, and then we can move forward with some of the other questions we're addressing.
Okay, yes, I did take a look at it. I have to glance at it again because I didn't memorize it, but I did. And I think that just from the perspective of being in the tax industry, working with wealthy and not so wealthy, I feel like there's something that has to be done that's going to help us middle class, as they say, us middle class Americans, those of us that are struggling through economic downpours because it's hitting us, it's like it's squeezing us in the middle. So the way I look at it is the wealthy get tax breaks, the extremely poor get tax breaks, but those that are of us that are in the middle, we're kind of like out there just swimming, trying to find something to hold on to. And I feel that with everything that's going on, that we need to advocate for something that's going to help us that are not business owners. We know that the tax code was written basically to benefit business owners. Well, everyone is not a business owner. So when you're not a business owner, you still incur the same costs that everybody else incur. But I think there has to be some way that we can come to a healthy medium where there's something on the table for just regular everyday working class citizens who work hard. I mean, we work just as hard as business owners, if not harder. And then there's nothing on the back end for us. So I feel like if we could really get this thing going and do something that can kind of help us, because like the little bit that we did have back in the day, the few expenses that we were able to collect on, they're gone. And when you look at just, the whole tax code in a whole, it's just not advantageous to the everyday working American. So we need to do something.
You about to say something, Rob? Or?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that the tax code or system as it is now has been really a great divider when it really has the opportunity to be a great equalizer. We look at the hierarchy of women to men and the pay gap and so on and so forth. I would be progressive enough to say that we identify those disparities and then supplement it by way of the tax code. If a woman if makes an 80 cent to the dollar for that man, let's find a tax break somewhere that may benefit a woman to kind of equalize. And I think that finding ways and gaps to shore up to even the playing field by way of the tax code really will create a different type of economy moving forward.
Well, Adaeze, you actually, so you worked at a Big Five accounting firm, so you've seen this probably more than any of us. But at the end of the day, when we talk about the tax code and socialism and who it works for, I mean, we subsidize corporations, ad nauseum, right? I mean, we give them tons of tax, not only tax breaks, but just straight revenue. We borrow money in the form of our budget deficit to make sure Elon Musk can go to the moon, right? I mean, like really, but we can't get a tax break for gas costs to go to work. So is it really so? We're talking about Paul. We're talking about the definition of socialism. Every time someone says, tax break here or raise taxes there, they throw the word socialism out. But is it really socialism if we're borrowing money to give rich people, like they're transferring from us to the rich people? Does it really make sense?
No. Did you say Paula? Because in my brain, the answer is no.
Yeah. Yeah, I was asking you. I was going to ask everybody, but I was to start with you.
I am one that I believe in equity and fairness. Mm-hmm. And I just feel that across the board, I mean, if you look at us as a whole, we're pretty much here in the same circle doing the same thing. So why is it that if we're all in the same rat race, some of us are struggling? I mean, if you look at the statistics of where we are as far as repos and bankruptcies,
yeah, I just
the housing market. I'm sorry, I may have missed that when I cut out, but we all.
You're echoing. You must have two. Something must be off.
What could be the reason?
You're still echoing.
Okay, it just started.
Yeah.
I am today with this internet. I'm sorry.
It's probably just the internet, probably the weather.
Yeah, it's been a little rainy, but okay. So am I still echoing?
Go ahead. You good.
Okay. So I feel like when it comes to socialism, I truly don't believe in that word socialism. That's just my personal belief. And as I said before, I see it every day doing taxes for all calibers of people. There has to be something. And before my internet screwed up and made me lose my train of thought, this is one of the things that I think about when we look at it from a standpoint of individuals and businesses. One of the things that came to my mind earlier when Mr. Robert was speaking was that if you look at how the tax code protects one group but affects the others, we're struggling right now as a unit to get to a place of economic stability. So if you have the tax code written to where you know what a 1099-C is, That's what a company sends you when they cancel your debt. Well, on their balance sheet, that's a plus for them because they can write that off as bad debt. But then for us as consumers, we have to pay taxes on that bad debt that a company is capitalized on it. Make it make sense. It's not fair. It's not balanced. So that's just one example of what we're going through. And when I look at the statistics of how, you know, the rise of the economic downfall is just, you know, just from one area to the other, from food to healthcare, you know, being also a licensed insurance agent, and I work with the senior market, and I see how this year the cuts in Medicare and what's going on. And for example, a lot of the Medicare Advantage programs this year don't have that over-the-counter card and that food card, which a lot of people, and I know a lot of people personally that rely on that. So that $7,500 a month is keeping them going and keeping them from being in a place where they're not going to eat. So is it fair that we ship out all this money to other places and do all this other stuff to help other people when our people here, and these are people that have poured into the system over the years. So it's not like we're giving them anything. They're just getting back a little bit of what they put in. Then those of us that are here now that are working and pouring into the system, we don't have anything to balance us out if we're not business owners. So I just feel like, you know, that's why I really don't believe in that word socialism. I know it exists, but I personally don't believe in it. And seeing it every day from not just from a tax standpoint, but from a healthcare standpoint and just an overall financial standpoint, I feel like socialism is not what it's cracked up to be.
Okay. Rob, you were going to say something before Paul jumped in, or should I go ahead?
I definitely agree with Ms. Paula to the degree, but you know, for the sake of, I would like to educate, as a community move forward, of taking away the words, because the words and the description is what, you know, it kind of throws us off. If you're advocating for the rich, it's called capitalism. If it's for the poor, it's socialism. Is this a matter of shifting wherever you want to help out? But let's be honest and kind of let's be clear, is that what African-American women is 3% of the population, yet they made 12% of the federal workforce. So when those federal jobs was cut, 300,000 women was affected negatively by that. Well, guess what? If that was 300,000 banks, we would say that the banking industry is too big to fail. Well, how come the Black community and Black women are not too big to fail? So we have to start looking at our community and our constituents as too big to fail and start investing and protecting them just as much as we do these big banks and a lot of and businesses, period. We also need to look at our predatory practices. It doesn't make sense that we have a code that benefits capitalism, if you will, where profits are increasing. But at the end of the day, if we was to rate the economy right now, where the hell is that led us? Something has to be done. Something has to change. And so socialism, not just saying, hey, you get a dollar, you get a dollar, not saying none of that, but by way of the tax code, providing or extending those tax breaks, shifting them, not tax cuts, but shifting those tax breaks that you give to the top 1% to the 99%. To some of the those that are at the poverty line, shift those tax cuts and tax breaks and increase those returns, and we'll see something different happen in this country.
You know, there's a question for you. As we've been, Rob said, we were trying to get ahead of the messaging and trying to do, like, you wrote a really great op-ed. I should have put it on though. It's going in the journal this month, but I should have put it out. How is it that we can't, you know, how is it that we can't get our politicians? Maybe this is actually another question for Rob, but you've got Florida and Virginia as your bases of operation. You know, do you ever hear the politicians talking about these things? I mean, why is it that we don't hear our elected officials? I don't call them leaders. They're our representatives. Why don't we hear our representatives talking about this stuff?
Well, I would say this. Because before we went on to this question, we were talking about how to get things shifted. Okay. And I think you're going to ask me something about what I've seen with working with the, large corporations and things like that. One thing I do know is that they lobby. I mean, that's not a secret. Okay. And lobbying, they might also have finances to do different things, but hey, it's our laws. We're not supposed to do bribes and all that. Okay. So the lobbying is something that is not a respecter of persons, so to speak. Okay. The businesses do this. That's why we're seeing all that you see, you know, what you might call ridiculous, what you might call extravagant. Some things are absolutely pointed towards an industry or an organization, you know, that get passed because of that groundwork that they have been doing. Now, Mr. Robert said something interesting when he was throwing out percentages there about the Black women and how the percentages of the effect of the shutdown.
Right.
And what we do have for us, right, in the middle, that middle class that Paul was also talking about, is numbers. Okay. Right? Because if we're the ones currently carrying the brunt of everything, and it's a lot, you know, because it's not the top and it's not the bottom. So we have the numbers. We need to focus those numbers in areas to affect change, which is why I joined that inclusion summit that you know, are bringing out there, because if you have the numbers behind and go to the delegates or, you know, whomever, and Mr. Robert can speak to this, if there's numbers there, then the people, especially if we do it strategically, you know, oh, you're up for reelection. Oh, you just came in and and, you know, you campaigned on these issues. Well, here's one, you know what I mean? Because there are laws and strategies and things in place that we want them to be able to reach all of us. Okay. So we don't have to fight the fight of let's invent the wheel. Oh, there's a vehicle already there, but it's being applied this way. How about, you know, how about we shift, like Mr. Roberts said, shift it this way, or allow us to be included, inclusion, right? Because it's supposed to be a nation for the people, by the people. At least that's what I thought we had been learning in history class. That's a way to do it, because then there's also the politics of it. You know, they're like, oh, well, if we don't have the money, maybe we can't. But if you don't have the money, but you have the numbers, then because of the way the system was set up, this democracy that we're trying not to erode, let us use it, you know what I mean, as the vehicle that it was set up all those years ago. But that will require, I think, also a perspective change. I think a lot of times we don't do these things because we think we're not important. Either we think we're not important or we think it doesn't affect us. So about the affecting portion, I don't think we have to do so much work in that because of where things are, because people that weren't affected before are now being affected. So now it's like, oh, wait, well, what can I do? You know what I mean? And that's how we can, I think, shift the conversation so that we are included.
I think that was, you know, Article 1 of the Constitution guarantees the right of the people to seek redress from the government for their problems or complaints. So we don't do that enough. I mean, I spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill. Very rarely do you. One example I bring up a lot lately is all these lawsuits and all this stuff going on against Black contractors, or getting rid of Black preferences, or getting rid of affirmative action. None of the Black businesses who are affected are filing lawsuits. Right? None of them are engaged. None of them are on Capitol Hill lobbying. None of them are doing, you know, the work that needs to be done at the city, state, or federal level. So I do think that's, you know, I'm glad you said it, because advocacy is, Rob will tell you, that's what first thing we said is advocacy is what we have to do with. We have to organize ourselves. Paula, so, you know, where do you think, I mean, how do you, so except for Rob, who's running for office, how many of you have reached out to, and people in the audience, how many of you reached out to your members of Congress or your state officials or local officials? How many, you know, Paul, you just mentioned the governor's race. Have you reached out to the governor to see what she can do to be helpful to the people in the community?
Yes.
I think she froze again.
Okay, am I frozen?
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things that I found out, I tried to stay, and honestly, away. I try to stay away from politics because it becomes consuming. Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, but with this last race, my daughter has always been into politics ever since she went to college. So with this last race, she was a field organizer for the Democratic campaign. So as her mother, I supported her, and it's a lot of work. So hats off to everyone that does this. But one of the things that I found out was that unless you speak up and until your voice is heard, a lot of things won't get done. And like I said, I try to stay neutral, because with what I do, you can't always cross up politics because you'll lose clients, but it is what it is. We believe what we believe, and we have the right to believe. However, one of the things that I saw her do personally with my own eyes was how she was able to shift things as a field organizer, going in as a young Black woman, you know, just full force. She gave it all she had, and because of the work that my daughter did, she made a difference. She didn't do it by herself, but she made a difference because she's that voice that she's not going to back down. You know, she went through a lot of challenges, and some of it is because she's a female. And I just sat back and I watched her, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't just jump in and just, do what I want to do as mom. But I was, grateful that I raised her to where she has a voice and she uses it. So having said that, I think that if all of us, no matter how big, little, small, whatever we are, if we just use our voice, we can make a difference. Because one of the things that my grandma used to tell me when I was younger, my mother used to tell me, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So if we open our mouths, we're going to get fed. We're going to hear what we need to hear if we keep pushing to get what we need to get. If we sit in silence, like we've done a lot of times, like for me, I'm guilty of it. I just try to avoid conflict at all costs because life is still rolling. But now with this last race, I saw things from a different perspective. So now I'm all hands on deck, because it's going to take all of us to jump in and help, because one person can't do it. And just like Mr. Robert, he's, doing what he's doing, but he's only one person. So we all have to rally around him if we're going to support him and do everything that we can do. And it may not be, we're not physically out there on the campaign trail with him, but it's small stuff we can do, like sending letters, making phone calls, just doing some research, educating our people. We're all on this platform called social media. Every day we have our phones in our hands and we engage in some type of social media. It only takes one moment for us to say something that could spark the interest in someone else, because a lot of times our people are not doing anything because they simply don't know what they can do or what to do.
Rob?
No, I'm trying to hold it together. Miss Paula was saying a word right there. But to add on, and I thank you for being vulnerable and transparent, Miss Paula, because I want to encourage every, viewer, is that is one of our number one problems and issues with us as a community, is that we tell ourselves we don't get involved with politics. Guess what? That's your seat at the table.
Yes.
And then we want to, raise our voices. Well, we're outside the restaurant yelling through the glass now, on social media, being pundits with an opinion, when we had a seat at the table. Very direct. Get involved with politics. You cannot run away. We cannot afford you to disengage from what politics are. I'm not saying tie yourself to a politician or the person or the individual, but get involved with the process by any means necessary. And what is even more so important is because when we was talking about lobbyists earlier, man, that is the number one issue. And I hold ourselves accountable. And I get a lot of flack and pushback from it that don't give a damn. The D9s, the Kappas, the Deltas, the AKAs, the churches, the preachers, all of us working in silos, we have to take a pause and a break and start coming together. Those are lobbyist type of institutions that you should be lobbying for on behalf of your congregation or on behalf of your following, whatever the case is, because you have to come together. You have to bring your followers. So while we shimmying and doing everything, all that is cool, but we need to get people to the voting blocks. We need to get people involved in the process, and we need to educate them, because guess what? As a politician, these politicians come out, around November, they're going to come out, they're going to come up to the pulpit, they're going to get your vote, they're going to do whatever they do, shuck and job, and guess what? Then they're gone. Then when they get in DC, that money starts talking, and now they got other people in their ear, because that's the greater influence. And that is the problem with politics. And I tell people all the time, I'm not a politician, I'm a solutionist that just happened to be in politics. But we got to hold ourselves accountable. Not to take too much of the time right now, But Kevin, we talked about it before. We had this innovative idea called the FCAB, a Federal Community Advisory Board. And I encourage every single representative to have the same. And that's a board of stakeholders and leaders in your community. For mine, it's 29 people that every single month I meet with. I educate them what's on the ballot. I mean, what's been voted on. I educate them on the process. I let them go to the constituency. They come back, they vote. Wherever that board votes, that's my vote in Washington, D.C. I represent 800,000 people. It's not on me. But what that does is take the people along in the process and hold myself accountable. And just like in business, when I fail, that board fires me. We have to figure that connectivity, that gap, that after the ballot is cast, the community still hold control of that seat and not lobbyists in D.C. running the streets down here in our community. So we got a lot of work to do.
Well, you guys said, one of y'all said reparations earlier, and to Rob's point, and to actually everyone's point about being engaged, the governor of Maryland, who's an African-American, Black governor of Maryland, vetoed a reparations study, right? Yet there's been, the outcry has been muted at best in the state. But if ever there was a time to hold someone accountable, I mean, we're talking about the lowest of low-hanging fruits you can have. And I do think, this conversation is about tax policy because we're trying to demystify, like we had healthcare, we've done education, we're going to do opportunity zones next week or the week after. So we're going to talk about all these complicated policy issues. But the most important thing is the process, which is what I want other people to see, because everyone always asks me, well, I tell them all the problems. They go, we're tired of hearing the problems. What are the solutions? But every time you talk to them about solutions, and they don't, well, I don't want to do that. I'm not qualified. Everyone's afraid to do the solutions. Everyone's afraid to get their hands dirty. But that's the nature. So this conversation went where I would have hoped it would go, which was the issues don't matter. It's the process that matters. Like for whatever, whether it's transportation, whether it's, affirmative action, whether it's reparations, whether it's tax code or healthcare, whatever. Absolutely. The process is the same, organizing and being engaged and coming up with policy. So I'm glad to hear you guys all say the same thing, but I just thought the governor of Maryland, who elected by a majority of Black people, voted for him. He went to all the churches, et cetera, like Rob says, and then had the nerve to, not only did he vote against it, if he's going to veto it, but he didn't even ask anybody what they thought. He didn't reach out to any of he didn't have an advisory board in the community. He just decided it was in his best political interest to veto a reparations bill in a state that, 25, 30% Black with a long history of slavery. I mean, so I think that is an important thing that with the way you guys all talked about that is very important. We got about 10 minutes left, and I mean, I don't want to belabor it, but this is when Adaeze said advocacy and lobbying, I was like, yes, this is the right conversation. And Rob, I know, is committed to it. What else, if you want people to leave with one thing from this conversation besides getting engaged, or maybe that is what it is, what would you say to them? And start with you, Paula. And sorry if you have something else to say, because you got shortchanged. So if you may have had a whole long speech, please, we can give you 10 minutes if you want to talk about yourself and what you do.
Do you want to let Azaria go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's let her go first.
Who, me?
Yeah, you go.
Oh. Oh wow, I just had a.
So what do you want to leave people? I mean, you've actually laid a lot of knowledge. So.
Yeah, well, to seek out the information, seek out some information, become knowledgeable. Like, this is the information age. So we don't have to run to a library and get stacks of books this high and things like that. So, I mean, you start on, whatever on the internet and start getting some information, and then be led. And I think that's the gateway. That's the door. Get some information, and not that's your to do, but also know you matter.
Yes.
Because you weren't put here for no reason. Everyone else put here for a reason. So you matter, and start seeking out information. Start studying.
Yeah. Paula?
I was writing it down so I wouldn't forget. Okay. Because my brain goes 100 miles an hour. It's so much I want to say. We only have a short period of time. But get informed and get accurate education. Sound the alarm and use your voice. And there's times when we're presented with bills and words that we don't understand. Well, everybody now knows that AI has good and bad, but if you don't understand something, you can pop it into AI and tell it to tell me what this is on a kindergarten level, and it'll help you to understand it. So we have no excuses. But I really think that we need to get engaged and get involved, because once we get involved, then we will be able to make a difference. If we just sit back on the sidelines and do nothing, and like I said earlier, I know that when you get involved, it makes a big impact, because real quickly, when my daughter was going through this whole process, and I went out canvassing just one day, went out canvassing with one of the officials. And when I went into the neighborhood, I was at one house, and I promise you, less than 3 miles down the street. And you know, you go from door to door to door. 3 miles down the street, when I got to one lady's house and I pulled up in her driveway, she was standing on her deck talking to somebody that I had talked to, had already been to their house. And she said, Paula is going to stop by your house with this candidate. I need you to talk to her. So when I got there, she listed 5 more people. She was like, go see this person, which they were already on the list. But that's just the impact of getting involved and letting your voice be heard. Now, I know that the little bit of work that I did made a difference, and the lot of work that my daughter did made a lot of difference. But if we all do just a little bit, we can all pitch in and make changes. But nothing is going to change if we sit back and complain and do nothing. And the last thing that I want to say is that when it comes to all of this, when it's time to vote, every vote and every election matters, because I was just so brokenhearted. You know, I worked the polls on election day, and I know that I'm nosy as crap. I shouldn't have been looking, but at the end of the night, I looked to see, you know, how many people that you just scanning through the numbers to see, just kind of get a gauge of how many people did not come out to vote. And I was so brokenhearted when I saw some of the people that I know that complain about the healthcare systems and the disadvantages, and they're cutting this and taking that, but you didn't come out to vote. So no vote, no voice. Yeah. So sound the alarm and let your voice be heard, and bring somebody with you.
Rob?
I would just say that, you know, every killer disease don't have symptoms until it's too late. Yeah. And we are under attack, and I'm speaking specifically to Black America, unapologetically. Yes. We are under attack. This is a dictatorship versus democracy, and this is not an attack on conservatives, Republicans that are sane and conservative, so on and so forth. This is a democracy versus a dictatorship, and Black America is under attack. And, you know, you can look at the recent declassifying or de-acknowledging whatever nursing for our women. And that's not a real degree, and accounting and so on and so forth. Well, we've seen this show before that ultimately they want women back into the home, into the kitchen, to where talk about making America great again. They're taking it back to the 40s. But what does that do for the Black woman, right? In the hierarchy of our society, the Black woman is almost at the bottom of the totem pole. And so any depression or economic failure, it hits the Black woman the hardest and the most. And so we're seeing these things from the federal cuts, and it may not seem that it's hurting us as Black America, because the shutdown doesn't hurt us as much, because we don't get a lot of governmental contracts and so on and so forth anyway. So it's like a little blip. But let me tell you, the war is being built all around us, and it's going to be too late by the time it's revealed. So we have to get acclimated into the process. Go seek the information. Don't wait till it comes to you. Don't just vote. Follow, vet who you're voting for. Don't do popular politics or someone that got name ID, or they're your soror or your frat brother. Look into these suckers and these individuals. Make sure they're the best person for the people, and hold them accountable. But most importantly, hold yourself accountable for the information. It's no excuse now. It's no excuse. And we need all hands on deck. We need everybody in the process, no matter who you vote for, but vote for somebody and get involved. And I hope you guys do it. And you can go to standwithslater.com, check out our platform. So I got to do a plug there, standwithslater.com. But STAND stands for successfully taking a new direction. That's what we hope to do when we win this race in March. So thank you for having me.
No, I will say, you know, this was great, the conversation. I'm always glad people talk about advocacy. That's so important. And, you know, when you talk about voting, the hardest thing is you don't have to be afraid to vote out somebody who's not doing a good job. I do think too many people get to stay in Congress or get to stay elected office when they're not doing a good job, because nobody wants no one wants to be the one to fire them. And I do think that has led to a lot of complacency and with our politicians, because they don't get challenged or they don't lose. So I do think that that's something that one of the responsibilities of being a boss, right? If you're the voter, you're the boss, is the ability to have to fire somebody when they're not doing a good job. I'll close it out with this, economically, we're probably heading to a recession, right? More than likely, we're heading to a recession. I mean, with the numbers we're seeing, with the repossessions and the late credit cards, and and the housing crisis in Florida, there's a lot to be said, and the frustration's high. But this is our opportunity. I mean, for everything that's being destroyed, there's opportunity for us to try to when it gets rebuilt, and make sure we have our place at the table. And that starts with us being at the table and doing what's necessary. So I'm glad that, every time I get a chance to talk to people, I'm always glad to see that they're ready, willing and ready and able to fight. And Rob's a great leader. So I drag him on the show every night. Since he asked me to do this, I drag him on here every night and get him to tell the story. But you guys again, Adaeze, you already wrote something for us and joined the coalition in Richmond, and hopefully Paula, you'll join too. And we will hold the Virginia governor accountable and the state legislature accountable. And we're doing it in New Jersey, we're doing it everywhere. And I will say this, I promised Adaeze I wouldn't make her talk about opportunity zones tonight. So we're not going to talk opportunity, but everybody who's on this call, if you're in a state, your state's got to redraw their opportunity zones. And that's a huge thing. And we may not get to, everyone should be thinking about it. Adaeze is going to write something for me that we can send out to people about organizing, creating opportunity funds. Paula, you're a tax person, find some finance guys. Everyone needs to have an opportunity fund created, whether you get funding for it or not, because we have to be in this. I mean, it's $1.5 trillion worth of borrowed tax money or borrowed government money that we're using for this process. And, all the states are going to be able to draw lines. Robert in Houston, make sure that the Acres Home has got a zone, is drawn into opportunity zone. That's a huge thing, and we only have that much time because the lines have to be drawn next year. So
actually, that's probably a good what do you call it? A point of where they take away. I don't want to say homework. There's another fancy word that's escaping me right now, but if they look up these opportunity zone things, because it is something that's in the tax law that is available for us. And if they're making them more favorable than what you're saying, if we seek that knowledge, right, that we've been talking about and start putting a plan together, then that is something that can help us achieve the goal of the inclusion, right, and coming up on the economic status as well. So if you don't understand what it is, I'm sure there's a professional around you that you could ask, a question or something about. So I will put that out there. And since Robert did a shameless plug, I will as well. My business is YHWH Enterprise. The website is YHWHenterprise.com. I have a heart for bringing, though, the knowledge of these things that are out there that these bigger businesses have that are available for the ones that maybe are not so big, or not just businesses, but individuals, so that we can benefit. That's the heart that I have. That's what I do when I have the opportunity to. So I did want to say that. So see, I did talk a little bit about the opportunity fund, Kevin.
I was gonna make you do it. We weren't gonna get away without doing it. So Paula, anything you want a shameless plug before you go?
I think I've said enough, but I always have so much more to say. But I'm on
We'll
board.
do another one.
So we'll follow. I'll follow up, because I am definitely on board, because I believe in education, and I truly believe that without education, you cannot make the best informed decision for yourself and for your life, much less your family. So I'm on board.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Thanks for listening in, and thank you guys for being here. Good night.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.